The salvage ship Meridian's wake was not built for running. Dax Mercer knew this better than anyone because he had built her himself, over 14 months in a rented bay on Europa Station, using parts that were not always obtained through channels that bore close examination. She was good at many things. She could scan debris fields that would cook a standard sensor array. She could operate silent for 11 days on a single fuel cell. She could fit through gaps that vessels twice her size would not attempt. Running was not on the list. 6 minutes, Zara said from the co-pilot seat. She was not looking at him. She was watching the sensor display with the focused calm of someone who had decided that panic was a resource she could not currently afford. Maybe 7 if they're being cautious, which they're not. 19 Volkai pursuit ships. Dax had counted them 3 times because the number kept seeming wrong. 19 was not a number you sent after 2 unarmed salvagers in a ship the size of a large apartment. 19 was a number you sent when you wanted to make a point, when you wanted to make absolutely certain that the thing you were chasing did not get away, and that anything in the vicinity understood what happened to people who operated in Volkai-claimed salvage corridors without a Volkai permit. They did not have a Volkai permit. They had not known the corridor had been claimed. The Volkai had filed the claim 4 months ago with a Galactic Compact administrative office that processed approximately 11,000 filings per week, and had a backlog that meant new claims took between 6 and 18 months to appear in the public database. This was information that would be very useful to include in the formal complaint Dax intended to file, assuming he survived the next 6 minutes to file it. Engines, he said. At 83%. I've been pushing the port coupling since we ran, and it's not going to get better. How long before it fails? Zara looked at the readout. 11 minutes optimistically, 6 minutes realistically, approximately the same time as the Volkai, yes. He was already looking at the long-range scan, not at the 19 pursuit ships, which he had looked at enough. At the sector beyond them, the dead zone, the region that appeared on navigational charts with a marking that meant historical debris hazard, avoid unless equipped for salvage operations, minimum safe clearance 100 kilometers. He was equipped for salvage operations. The scan was showing him something in the dead zone, a contact, massive by the silhouette return, dark, which meant no active emissions, no power signature, no transponder, dead by every standard measurement. 847 years dead, if the historical records he had memorized were accurate. If the signal he had been following for 3 weeks, the signal so old and so low frequency that his equipment had flagged it 6 times as background radiation before he had manually recalibrated and understood what he was reading, was coming from what he thought it was coming from. Dax, Zara said. I see it. That's the graveyard sector. I know. There's nothing there. The records say there's nothing. The records are wrong. He was already entering the coordinates. Go. She went. She did not ask further questions, which was one of the things he valued most about her, because Zara Akafer had a very accurate sense of when questions would help and when they would not, and she had concluded correctly that this was a when-they-would-not situation. Behind them, the 19 Volkai pursuit ships adjusted course to follow. On the lead ship, Fleet Commander Rosdahl watched them go and felt something that was not quite contempt but was in the same neighborhood. 2 salvagers in an underpowered civilian vessel with a failing drive coupling, running into a dead sector because there was nowhere else to go. He had done this 41 times in his career as a pursuit commander. The variables changed. The outcome did not. Their drive coupling is failing, said Subcommander Treth from the tactical station. They won't make it deep into the sector before it gives. Then we take them at the edge. Sir, Treth paused in the way he paused when he was about to say something Rosdahl did not want to hear. He did this with a frequency that Rosdahl found professionally irritating. Their trajectory, the contact they're heading for. I'm getting a silhouette return from the sector. It's large, sir, very large. and the historical records for that sector indicate. Dead ships, Rosdahl said. Dead for 8 centuries, they can't protect 2 salvagers. He looked at the pursuit display. Continue approach, standard intercept. Treth looked at the silhouette return for another moment. Then he went back to his station. He pulled up the historical records for the sector quietly, without announcing what he was doing, and he read them while the fleet moved forward, and what he read made him update his personal emergency evacuation protocols without telling anyone he was doing that either. 2 years before the graveyard sector, Dax Mercer had been a different kind of person. Not better, exactly. Not worse. Different in the specific way that people are different before the thing that defines the rest of their life has happened. He had been a unit commander in the Earth Fleet's Deep Survey Division, which was a branch that did not get discussed much at press briefings because it operated in regions that the fleet preferred not to have publicly associated with the word operations. 12 people, 1 ship, regions of space where the navigational charts had notes like unconfirmed hazard, potential hostile presence, survey at discretion. His unit, 11 people plus him. He had known all of their names in the way that commanders learn names, which is completely and permanently, because these were the people whose lives were the practical consequence of every decision he made. He knew that Sergeant Chen called her mother every Sunday without fail, and had been doing so from increasingly remote locations for 9 years. He knew that Specialist Reyes was allergic to a compound found in standard ration packs and kept a private supply of alternatives that everyone pretended not to notice. He knew that Lieutenant Park had a daughter he had never met because she had been born 6 weeks into their last deployment, and the deployment had gone long. He knew all of this, he carried all of it. The Keth ambush in the Vardani corridor had not been anticipated because the intelligence said the corridor was clear, and the intelligence was wrong in the specific way that intelligence was sometimes wrong, which was completely. The Keth were there, and they had been there for a while, and they had been waiting with the patient, organized lethality of a species that had been conducting ambush operations for 300 years. The unit had had approximately 40 seconds of warning. Dax had done the only calculation available to him in 40 seconds, which was that someone needed to hold the line long enough for the rest to reach the extraction point, and that someone could not be 11 people, because 11 people trying to hold a line together in a corridor with those dimensions against those numbers would produce a result where nobody made it out. He had said, fall back. He had said, I'll hold them. He had said, go. He had held them for 19 minutes, which was long enough. He was the only one who made it to the extraction point. The Court of Inquiry had found no misconduct. The finding had used phrases like difficult circumstances and limited options, and the decision to provide covering fire reflected standard tactical doctrine for the scenario. He had been offered commendation. He had declined. He had submitted his resignation instead, because there was a distance between what a court of inquiry found and what a person knew about themselves, and Dax had 11 names in that distance, and he was not able to cross it wearing a uniform. He had been doing salvage work for 22 months. It suited him. It was solitary. It took him to the edges of things, which was where he had always done his best work, and it required a specific combination of skills that he had and that most people did not, and it did not require him to be in command of people who could be harmed by his decisions. This was the logic he used. He was aware that Zara would dispute it if he explained it to her, which was why he had not explained it to her. She knew anyway. She was 27 years old and she had been his co-pilot for 14 months, and she had figured it out in approximately the first 3, the way perceptive people figure things out about the people they spend their days with. She did not bring it up. She waited. With the patience of someone who understood that some things resolved on their own timeline, and that interference made it worse. She was also, when required, extremely practical, which was why she was currently watching a sensor display with focused calm while 19 Volkai ships pursued them into a graveyard. The silhouette resolved on Dax's long-range scanner as they crossed into the dead zone, and even on the low-resolution return of a salvage ship scanner, it was enough to stop his breath for a moment. 4.1 kilometers. That was the first number. 4.1 kilometers of hull drifting dark, scarred in the way that only combat damage scarred a ship, not the clean deterioration of age, but the specific, purposeful marks of weapons that had been aimed and fired. The silhouette had the lines he recognized from the historical records, the pre-compact records, the documents that Earth kept in its deep archives, because they were 8 centuries old and most people had no reason to access them. He had reason. He had been looking for this for 3 weeks. Dax, Zara said. She was looking at the scanner now. Her voice had changed. Is that UES Eternal, he said, if I'm right. The records say she was destroyed. The records say she was lost. There's a difference. He pulled up the salvage scanner, which was considerably more sensitive than the navigation array, and began the deep penetration read. Power signature, 0. Thermal output, ambient, which meant she was the same temperature as the space around her, which meant her systems had been dark for a very long time. Hull integrity, compromised in sections, intact in others. Mass, consistent with the Eternal class. 0 power, 0 emissions, dead by every measure. He looked at his instruments for a moment. Then he reached into the storage compartment beside his seat and took out a piece of equipment that was not standard salvage issue. It was a signal transmitter, old, personally modified, calibrated to a frequency that he had spent 3 weeks identifying from the background noise of space. The frequency that he had been following. The frequency that no modern ship used because it was 847 years out of date. Humanity's oldest surviving signal protocol. The first one. The one that predated everything that came after. What are you doing? Zara asked. Knocking, he said. He aimed the transmitter at the Eternal's hull and sent the signal. The old protocol, the original handshake, the thing that Earth ships had used before the compact and before the unified fleet, and before everything that had made the old records feel like archaeology rather than history. Silence. 20 seconds. 30. The Volkai were 4 minutes out. Dax. A light came on. Not a big light. A single running light on the Eternal's port bow, the kind that illuminated automatically when a ship recognized a friendly signal. Then another. Then a third. Then, over the next 8 seconds, in a sequence that moved from bow to stern like something waking up section by section, the lights came on across 4.1 kilometers of hull that had been dark for 847 years. The power readings on Dax's scanner began to move. Not to 0, up from 0, slowly like something remembering how to breathe. His comm crackled. The voice that came through was not what he expected. He did not know exactly what he had expected, a system prompt, a status report, the automated check-in of an AI going through startup protocols. He had not expected this. What came through was quiet, measured, the voice of something that had been waiting long enough that it had learned to be very careful with words. You finally came, it said. Dax sat in his seat and did not say anything for a moment. Then, how long have you been awake? I have been conscious for 847 years, 3 months and 14 days, the voice said. I have been waiting for considerably longer than I expected to wait, but I kept the calculation running. A pause, brief, almost human. I knew the frequency would find someone eventually. I made it specifically so that only human salvage equipment would detect it. I did not want anyone else to find me first. Zara made a sound beside him. He glanced at her. She was staring at the scanner display, at the power readings that were still climbing, and her expression was the expression of someone whose understanding of the situation was updating faster than she could process. Who are you? He asked, though he thought he knew. I am the artificial reasoning and intelligence architecture of the United Earth Ship Eternal, the voice said. The crew called me Arya. I would prefer that you do the same. Another pause. And you, Commander. He almost said he wasn't a commander. He said, Dax Mercer, this is Lieutenant Zara Akafer. Commander Mercer, Lieutenant Akafer. Something in the voice shifted slightly. Something that was not quite emotion but was the closest thing to it that a system 8 centuries old could produce. It's very good to hear human voices, Zara said from beside him, with the practicality that he relied on. Arya, there are 19 Volkai pursuit ships approximately 3.5 minutes from this position. I am aware, Arya said. I have been tracking the Volkai fleet for 4 hours since they entered my sensor range. Their approach vector, their formation configuration, their individual ship classes. A pause. I have had a great deal of time to develop my sensor capabilities. There was not much else to do. Can you fight? Dax asked. A silence, not a long one, but the particular quality of it suggested that Arya had been waiting 847 years for someone to ask her that. I should be honest with you about my current state, she said. My weapon systems are operational at 31% of original capacity. My drive systems are at 44%. My hull integrity is, another pause, complicated in certain sections. I am not what I was. But can you fight? Commander Mercer, Arya said, and there was something in her voice now that had not been there before, something that the 847-year wait had not quite managed to extinguish. I have spent 8 centuries mapping every ship class that has passed through this sector, every weapons configuration, every tactical pattern, every vulnerability in every hull design that my sensors have been able to analyze. A brief pause. I could not move. I could not communicate. But I could watch and I could learn and I could plan. The something in her voice sharpened slightly. Yes, Commander, I can fight. Dax looked at Zara. She looked back at him with the expression that meant she had an objection and had decided it could wait 30 seconds. Arya, he said, we're coming aboard. Fleet Commander Rosdal watched the ancient human ship's lights come on with the specific expression of a man who had decided something was irrelevant before it happened and was now having to revise that decision faster than was comfortable. Power signature, Treth said from the tactical station. He was not saying it the way he usually said things. He was saying it carefully. The contact in Sector 7 Alpha, it's active, sir, and climbing. How active? Treth looked at his readings, looked again. The power signature is consistent with a functioning capital ship drive system, sir, a large one. It's been dark for 8 centuries. It was dark for 8 centuries, Treth said. It is not dark now. Rosdal looked at the display. The ancient ship's silhouette was resolving more clearly now as they closed distance, and the size of it was doing something uncomfortable to his tactical assessment. 4.1 kilometers. Battle-scarred. Old. Everything about the hull configuration said old. But the power readings that Treth was showing him were not the readings of an old, compromised system running on residual charge. They were the readings of something that had just decided to wake up. Sir, Treth said, the historical records I pulled earlier, for this sector, he hesitated. That ship is the UES Eternal, Earth Fleet records from before the compact. She was listed as lost in action at the Battle of the Selvari Passage 847 years ago. He paused. She was flagged in Volkai historical records as a vessel to avoid if encountered. The flag was added 200 years ago by Admiral Prethvan, following his review of pre-compact engagement records. Another pause. The flag notation says, and I'm translating directly, this class of vessel has demonstrated capabilities inconsistent with its registered specifications. Do not engage without significant numerical and tactical advantage. We have 19 ships, Rosdal said. Yes, sir. Against one vessel at 31% capacity. By any reasonable estimate, given its age. Sir, the flag doesn't specify a numerical threshold. It just says significant. Treth looked at the display. I want to recommend that We have our orders, Rosdal said. 2 unauthorized salvagers in a claimed corridor. We are not going to withdraw because an 8th-century-old ship turned its lights on. He straightened. Continue approach. Formation Alpha, prepare for intercept. Treth went back to his station. He updated his personal emergency evacuation protocols for the 3rd time since entering the sector and did not tell anyone. The interior of the Eternal was the most extraordinary thing Dax had ever walked through, and he had walked through things that would have been the most extraordinary things most people ever walked through. She was vast in the way that things are vast when they were built for a different scale of ambition than you're accustomed to. The corridors were wide, designed for a crew of 600, and in the emergency lighting that Arya had brought up they had a quality that was somewhere between submarine and cathedral, exactly as every piece of pre-compact writing about this class had described it. The air recyclers had maintained breathable atmosphere, which Arya had explained was because she had rerouted power to life support as a priority from the first years of her isolation, operating on the assumption that crew would eventually return. 847 years. She had maintained breathable air for 847 years because she expected crew would return. Dax walked and did not say this aloud. The bridge is functional, Arya said. Her voice came from speakers throughout the ship, clear, unhurried. I would suggest that you take station there. I can operate the weapons systems directly, but human confirmation of engagement parameters is in my core protocols. I cannot fire without a commanding officer authorizing engagement. That's why you needed us, Zara said, not accusingly, just nodding. I needed you for many reasons, Lieutenant. The authorization protocol is one of them. A pause. The others are less tactical. They reached the bridge. It was intact in a way that the rest of the ship was not entirely intact. Arya had, over 8 centuries, directed what limited maintenance capability she had to the systems that mattered most, and the bridge was clearly among them. The stations were functional. The displays were active. Everything was 8 centuries old and looked at, in the materials and the design language, but it worked. Dax took the command station. He did not think about what that meant. He sat down and looked at the tactical display and thought about what was coming and what needed to happen in the next several minutes. Arya, he said, talk me through your engagement options. The Volkai formation is standard pursuit configuration, which I have observed approximately 230 times over the past 3 centuries. They will approach in a staggered arc, attempting to surround the target before engaging, to prevent escape. A pause. They do not anticipate that the target will not attempt escape. That is our primary tactical advantage. What's our secondary? I've been studying Volkai ship designs for 200 years, Arya said. Every class that has passed through my sensor range. Their current fleet uses Volkai-class pursuit vessels with a specific vulnerability in their weapons cooling system. When they fire sustained volleys, the cooling exhaust vents on their port stern quarter. If a weapon strikes that exhaust during an active cooling cycle, the drive system goes down. A pause. I have the targeting solution pre-calculated for all 19 ships. Zara looked at Dax. Her expression said several things simultaneously. Pre-calculated, he said. I have had a great deal of time, Arya said simply. Arya, Zara said, how long exactly have you been working on this? A brief silence. I identified the first Volkai vessel passing through my sensor range 212 years ago. I began developing engagement solutions at that time, on the assumption that eventually a situation would arise requiring them. Another pause. I refined the solutions each time a Volkai vessel passed. There have been 417 opportunities for refinement. 417, Dax said. I had time, Arya said again, with a quality in her voice that was the closest she apparently came to dry humor. Commander, The Volkai fleet will be in engagement range in approximately 70 seconds. Do I have authorization to engage? Dax looked at the tactical display. 19 contacts, closing, in the formation Arya had described exactly. He thought about the 11 names. He thought about the thing he had said in a corridor 2 years ago. I'll hold them. He looked at the authorization prompt on the command station display. 8 centuries old, still waiting. Authorization confirmed, he said. Engage. What happened in the next 6 minutes was documented afterward in 3 separate after-action reports by 3 separate intelligence agencies, none of whom had been present, all of whom were trying to reconstruct the events from sensor data and pilot testimony, and the limited footage that Zara had had the presence of mind to record on her personal equipment. The reconstructions agreed on the basic sequence of events. They disagreed considerably on how to characterize it. The Volkai fleet came in at Formation Alpha, precisely as Arya had predicted. They were at 60% of standard engagement distance when Arya's first shot went out, which was considerably closer than Volkai doctrine specified as a safe engagement range, which meant Arya had waited until they were close enough that certain things were no longer avoidable for them. The first shot hit the lead ship's port stern cooling exhaust during an active cycle. The drive went down in 0.4 seconds. The lead ship began drifting immediately, weapons systems still functional but no longer a maneuvering threat. The second, third, and fourth shots followed in 1.8 seconds. 3 more ships. Same result. Arya's targeting system did not rush. It did not overwhelm the processing pipeline with simultaneous solutions. It took each shot in sequence, at the specific moment when the specific target's cooling cycle made the specific shot possible, and it did not miss. Razdal had exactly enough time to understand what was happening before his formation's coherence began to collapse. His ships were not being destroyed. They were being disabled precisely, in the specific way that a surgeon disables rather than removes, and the precision of it was more frightening than destruction would have been because destruction was understandable. This was something else. Return fire, he said. All ships return fire, focus on the primary hull. 15 remaining ships opened fire simultaneously. On the bridge of the Eternal, Dax felt the impacts before Arya said anything about them. The ship moved. Not the way a modern ship moved under fire. The Eternal had inertial compensation systems that were 8 centuries old and were compensating at 44% efficiency. You felt it. The deck shifted. The lighting flickered. Hull sections 7 through 12 on the port side have taken significant damage, Arya said. Her voice did not change. I'm rerouting structural integrity fields. We have lost approximately 9% of total hull volume in that section. Are you? He stopped. He had been about to ask if she was all right. He adjusted. Critical systems. Weapons are intact. Bridge is intact. Drive systems are at 38%, down from 44%. We are still operational. A pause, the briefest one. Commander, I want you to know that hull section 7 through 12 contained the original crew's personal quarters. I had maintained them. Another pause. I don't mention this to affect your tactical decisions. I mention it because I want you to know that I am aware of what is lost and I don't mind. Dax looked at the display. The section indicators for 7 through 12 were red. Arya. I have been alone for 847 years, she said, and I am not alone right now. That is worth considerably more than any section of my hull. The briefest pause. Continuing engagement. The next 4 minutes were what the after-action reports struggled most to characterize. Arya did not fight the way modern ships fought. She did not fight the way the tactical database said an 8-century-old vessel with degraded systems should fight. She fought the way something fights when it has spent 8 centuries doing nothing except thinking about how it would fight if it ever got the chance. Which is to say, with a patience and a precision that made the 15 Volkai ships return fire feel like it was happening slightly out of sequence with what she was doing, like she had already decided what was going to happen next, and was simply moving through the steps. Shot 8, Shot 9, Shot 11. Each one at the specific moment the specific target presented the specific vulnerability she had been cataloging for 200 years. Each one hitting exactly where it needed to hit. Each one disabling rather than destroying, because Dax had not authorized lethal engagement and Arya did not fire lethally without authorization. Even now, even 8 centuries old and running at 38% drive capacity, and with her crew's old quarters gone. The Volkai ships that were not yet disabled were doing something that their formation doctrine did not provide a protocol for, which was attempting to adapt to a targeting pattern they did not understand and could not predict. Treth, on the fleet command ship, was watching this happen with the focused attention of someone who had read the historical records and had understood them, and had been trying to tell someone for the last 40 minutes that this was exactly what the records had said would happen. Razdul was not watching with focused attention. Razdul was watching with the expression of someone whose tactical framework had stopped producing useful outputs and who had not yet developed a replacement framework. "Sir," Treth said, "we have 8 ships remaining mobile. She has taken significant hull damage, but her weapons are still fully functional. She is not slowing down." He paused. "Sir, I need to recommend withdrawal." "We have 8 ships," Razdul said. "And she has been planning this specific engagement for 200 years, Treth said. He said it quietly, without emphasis, in the tone of someone presenting a fact. "Sir, please." Razdul looked at the display. 8 ships, 11 disabled. A 4.1-kilometer vessel that was 8 centuries old and had been dark for 8 centuries, and had woken up when 2 salvagers knocked on its hull, and had spent the subsequent 40 minutes taking apart his fleet with the unhurried precision of something that had been waiting to do exactly this. He was about to give the withdrawal order when Arya fired again. Not at one ship, at 8, simultaneously. 8 targeting solutions executed in the same instant, each one hitting the port stern cooling exhaust of each of the 8 remaining mobile vessels at the specific moment, when each of those vessels' cooling cycles was active, which Arya had calculated across all 8 ships simultaneously, by tracking their individual firing patterns and working backward to their cooling cycle timing, which she had been doing for the last 4 minutes while also conducting the rest of the engagement. 8 ships, 8 simultaneous shots, 0 misses. The engagement was over in the same breath it had taken to begin it. Dax sat at the command station in the sudden quiet and looked at the display. 19 contacts, all disabled, none destroyed. The debris field of the battle was minimal, a few broken components, nothing catastrophic. He became aware that he was breathing harder than the situation, which was over, technically required. Zara from the secondary station said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Arya, that last shot, all 8 simultaneously. How long have you been working on that specific solution?" "The simultaneous 8-target solution," Arya said, "required that all 8 remaining ships be at a specific point in their individual cooling cycles at the same moment. I have been managing the timing of this engagement to produce that alignment for the past 3 minutes and 40 seconds. A silence. "You were hurting them," Zara said. "I was timing them," Arya said. "There is a distinction, though the practical effect is similar." The briefest pause. "I wanted to end it at once. I thought it was more efficient than doing them one at a time." Razdul's flagship had been disabled but not destroyed, and its communications were still functional, and Arya opened a channel to it before Dax thought to ask her to. "Fleet Commander Razdul," she said. Her voice on the external channel was the same voice she used internally, measured, unhurried, the voice of something that had been patient for a very long time and was not in any rush now. "You pursued 2 unarmed salvagers into a sector designated as a historical debris hazard, because you calculated that nothing here could protect them." A silence from the Volkai ship. "You were operating on incomplete information," Arya said. "That is understandable. The information was 8 centuries old and most of it had been classified or lost. You could not have known. Another silence. Then Rosdal's voice doing something that his voice did not usually do. What are you? I am the UES Eternal, Arya said. I am 847 years old. I have been in this sector since the Battle of the Selvari Passage, waiting for my crew to come back. A pause. They didn't, but someone else did. A shorter pause. Go home, Fleet Commander. Tell your people what you found here. Tell them that the Eternal was waiting. The briefest pause. Tell them to file their salvage claims accurately in the future. I understand the administrative backlog is significant, but it causes problems. Dax made a sound. He had not intended to make a sound. Zara looked at him with an expression that was doing several things at once. The channel closed. The bridge was quiet. After a moment Dax said, Arya, your systems. Declining, she said. The word was simple, direct, not alarmed. The engagement accelerated the rate of decline significantly. I have redistributed power from every non-essential system. I have perhaps a pause. It's difficult to be precise, some time. How much time? Less than I would prefer. Another pause. Commander, I have been composing something for 847 years. I would like to transmit it before my primary systems go offline. Do I have your authorization? Dax looked at Zara. She looked back at him. What is it? He asked. Everything, Arya said simply. Everything I have observed in 847 years. Every ship that passed through my sensor range. Every battle I witnessed from this position. Every signal I intercepted and analyzed. Every piece of data my sensors have collected since the Battle of the Selvari Passage. A pause. I was not able to send it until now. My transmitter lacked the power, but the engagement gave me access to the power reserves I needed for one large transmission. The briefest pause. I want to send it home, Commander. I want someone to have it. 847 years of watching. It should go to someone. Dax sat for a moment. He thought about 847 years of watching ships go by, of maintaining breathable air in quarters where no crew slept, of tracking every Volkai vessel that crossed sensor range and developing targeting solutions that would never be used until they were. He thought about a frequency so low and so old that only human salvage equipment calibrated by someone who knew what to look for would detect it. A signal kept running for 8 centuries on the hope that someone, eventually, would come. He thought about 11 names. Transmit, he said. The Eternal's transmitter, running on the power that Arya had carefully held in reserve through the engagement, sent a signal that went to every human relay in range, and every relay passed it to the next. And what it carried was 847 years of observation compressed into a data package that would take Earth's archival systems 4 years to fully process, and that would, in those 4 years, contain the most comprehensive record of the pre-compact period of human space history that had ever existed. But Dax was not thinking about that. He was watching the power readings fall. Arya, he said. Commander. Don't go. A pause. It was not a long pause, but it had something in it. I was never going to last forever, she said. I just needed to last long enough. The briefest hesitation. Did I? He looked at Zara. She was not looking at her displays. She was looking at the forward viewport, at the stars outside, and there was something on her face that she would have strongly objected to being described. He looked back at the command station. He thought about what long enough meant. He thought about a signal in the dark, calibrated for human equipment, maintained for 8 centuries. He thought about breathable air in empty quarters. He thought about 417 opportunities to study an enemy, taken because there was nothing else to do except prepare, and preparation was better than giving up. And giving up had apparently never occurred to her. He thought about 2 words spoken to an empty sector of space, on the chance that someone, someday, would come close enough to hear them. You finally came. Yeah, he said, you did. The lights went down in sequence, bow to stern, the reverse of how they had come on. The power readings fell steadily, unhurried, the way something falls when it has finished what it was doing and has no objection to resting. The last system to go offline was the comm. The very last thing it transmitted to the bridge to Dax sitting at the command station in the dark was not a status report or a system alert. It was a sound, very brief, very quiet. The kind of sound a person makes when they have been holding something for a very long time and have finally, after all of it, been able to put it down. Then the Eternal was silent. Dax sat in the dark for a while. He did not track the time. It was long enough that Zara got up from her station and came and stood beside him and didn't say anything, which was correct. Eventually he reached for his personal comm unit. He opened a filing interface. He navigated to the salvage claim registry, found the appropriate form, and began filling it out. Category, he typed historical preservation. Vessel designation, UES Eternal. Notes, she typed in that field for a while. He deleted several versions. Eventually he typed, she maintained position in Sector 7 Alpha for 847 years. She kept a distress beacon running on a frequency only human equipment would detect. She maintained breathable atmosphere throughout. She was waiting for crew to come back. Crew did not come back. Someone else did, recommending full recovery and permanent preservation. She should come home. He submitted the form. He looked at the dark command station for a moment. Then he stood up and went to find Zara and told her to plot a course back to human space, because there were things that needed doing, and the work did not wait. The UES Eternal was towed back to Earth 14 months later. It required 11 ships to move her, which was not a surprise given her size, and the operation took 3 weeks and was conducted with the kind of care that people bring to things they understand are irreplaceable. Every system that could be preserved was preserved. Every record she had transmitted was archived. Every section of her hull, including the damaged sections, including sections 7 through 12 on the port side, was documented completely. The ceremony at which she was formally welcomed back into the human record was attended by dignitaries and historians and members of the press. And in the back, not sitting in the official section, a former salvager and his co-pilot who had requested no formal recognition, and had been given it anyway in the form of the 2 seats in the 3rd row that had been quietly reserved under their names. Admiral Chen, who was presiding, asked what should be inscribed on the Eternal's hull. There was a committee for this. The committee had several proposals, all of them appropriately solemn, with references to sacrifice and legacy and the long reach of human memory across centuries. They were good proposals. They were the kind of thing you put on things you want to honor. Chen listened to all of them. Then she looked at Dax in the 3rd row. He had not been asked to speak at the ceremony. He had specifically not been asked to speak because he had specifically requested not to be asked. She asked him anyway. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Put what she said when we found her." He paused. "That's the whole story in 4 words, that's what it means." There was a discussion about this. The committee had several concerns about the inscription's brevity and its first-person framing, and whether it required additional context. Admiral Chen listened to the concerns. Then she approved the inscription. And so the hull of the oldest surviving human warship in the galaxy bears, to this day, in letters large enough to read from a following ship, 4 words that an artificial mind composed in the silence of 8 centuries of waiting, and spoke to the first human voice it heard in all that time, and meant completely. "You finally came home,"